So, welcome to our first Initiate AI webinar. Initiate AI is a new brand for Engaged Agility. When we found out that we were going to be one of the charter partners for AI Native, I figured that we needed a new brand for it because Engaged Agility, while the engaged portion still exists for everything that we do, the AI portion is a little bit different than agility. So we started a new brand. It's called Initiate AI. You can see our new logo on the screen in the bottom right there. We also have a new website. You'll get to see that here in just a couple of minutes, where you can look up our classes and things like that. Today, we're going to talk about the AI native professional and how it's redefining our roles in the age of AI. You can see our panelists here. We've got Phil, who's going to do a lot of the facilitation today. And then Brian, Randy, and Russell will be talking about their experience as they went the through the AI native classes. That's one thing that's kind of new here for AI native is instructors actually have to take the classes before they can teach them, which is really, really exciting. And so you get to hear about their experiences today and kind of what their aha moments were. I think we'll have a lot of fun at it. The two classes they'll be referring to are going to be the AI Native Foundations class, which kind of focuses on the individual. It's how does AI impact you and your job? And I saw one slide in a webinar that Scaled Agile put on that had this little circle that said, "Hey, this is safe," and it handles product development and scaling product development. It does really well at that. But then, like the Venn diagram completely took over and said AI affects everybody, everybody from marketing to accounting to anybody can use AI in their job. And so it's taking a different view and a different look at it. And the AI Foundations is showing how individuals can harness the power of AI in their day-to-day stuff. And then the AI Native Change Agent class is there to look at how do we spread the AI initiative across an organization. And it takes a change agent within an organization to be able to do that. And what are some of the tools and techniques that can make that happen? If you are interested in any of our classes, you can look at Initiate AI. This is our new website. And you can see our class calendar down here. You can scroll through and look at the different months that we have. And right now we're offering classes in North America and New Zealand, and we plan to have Australia soon. But Russell, who you'll get to hear from, and you'll get to hear his lovely Kiwi accent, he's actually teaching classes in New Zealand for us, and we're excited for that. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to Phil and the panel, and they can run with it from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. Welcome, everybody. So just to reiterate, I'm not going to monitor chat. I'm going to monitor the questions. So as questions come in, some of you may have seen me on other webinars. I love doing these panel webinars because I get to brag on other cool people. They're doing awesome stuff out there in the world of SAFe. And I had the opportunity to go through these first two classes with the incredible Dr. Steve Maynard. He's the main AI guy at Scaled Agile. He spent the last 3 or 4 years just going all in on this stuff. And these individuals and I, we went together through a group of 15 others here in the Dallas area a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, through a train the trainer with Dr. Maynard. And so really what we talk about here is get some first impressions, right? Because inside that class, something that was really cool was you see that light bulb moment where it's like, there's more to AI than ChatGPT, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So think of this as the experience of people who are going to be out teaching it. In fact, Brian's teaching the first class for Engaged Agility here in what, 2 weeks, Brian? 3 weeks?
Yeah, in about 3 weeks here, right at the end of September 29th and 30th.
And we'll talk more about that at the end, but let's get into the meat of this. So when you first came into the AI Native Foundations, it's this 2-day class followed by a 3-day class for Change Agent. What assumptions or expectations did you have about AI? Randy?
Yeah, when I came in, it was, I had done some research on it. I've been following neural networks since, let's just say, the 90s, and just kind of how that all played out. And so I had this idea that it was very deep and very broad. But as we went through the content, I was really impressed with how true that was. Now, the thing that I was actually also impressed with is how non-scary they made that content,
Mm.
right? Because it's like, oh my goodness, it's very deep and very broad and huge, but really, in the end, it's not as bad as you think. And it was very gentle in the way that they introduced that, and I appreciated that.
Awesome. How about you, Brian? What are your take on it?
Yeah, I like that Randy called it gentle because it wasn't throwing you into the fire necessarily and just seeing what happens. It was more like, hey, we have this story we're trying to tell around where AI is today and how that's changing society, how it's changing careers, and how it's changing, people trying to implement it. And I think they did that in a very I wouldn't say soft way, but in a way that makes it easy for almost anybody to digest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Consumable.
love the focus on mindset too. I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of it was they focused more on mindset. And then they got into implementation as well, where a lot of times people just say, show me the tool, give me chat GPT and let me go. But in this case, they're like, well, there's more to it than that.
And thanks, Brian. And Russell, I remember just the look of wonder on your face at a couple times during the class. You want to tell us more about what you were thinking and feeling there?
Yeah, I think my experience with AI up to that point had been kind of using it to generate mediocre text, right? And of course, I think we've all been exposed to sort of subpar LinkedIn posts, which are quite obviously AI generated. But what was the eye opener for me is A, so much more than that, and so many more useful applications. B, the limitations of the outputs that I was getting was because of my own lack of skill in actually writing prompts and applying the tool properly. And then thirdly, really the experience in the class of actually using AI and encouraging us to use AI to answer questions and to debate with and bring it in almost as a partner in the course was a real eye-opener to me. And that's kind of how I work now. I'm now working in that way. Um,
Along that line, what was your biggest aha moment? Because I remember witnessing one. I saw them all around the room. It was pretty cool. What was the one that what was that moment during the class where it changed how you think about AI in your role as a consultant, as a trainer, as a
yeah, I think it was the suggestion of the observation that you treat AI as an additional team member. And so while that must sound very like a very soft insight, it's actually really shifted my thinking about how you actually apply AI, not quite as a tool, but and this might sound really strange, but it really works, treating it like a person that you're bouncing ideas off. And that really, really helps me. And that's how I use it day to day now. That
I
that was a
love to
really, really it sort of was a paradigm shift in my head about how I thought about AI.
and we'll come back around to that AI as a teammate in a couple minutes because it's really a powerful point from the course. Um, what about you, Brian?
For me, I'd have to say that one of the biggest aha moments was whenever we got into the how, right? Especially in change agent, we really got into, well, how do you actually do this? Because it's not as simple as saying you're going to go purchase some licenses, some tokens, and then you're just going to run with it. It's not quite that simple. But we got into the strategy behind, okay, how do you actually implement this? How do you design the implementation? And how do you actually set this path forward? I'd say that was one of the biggest ahas for me was actually doing in the class.
Yeah, and on that note, when we look at this class, right, this shift from experimenting with AI to embedding AI in this daily way of working, right? And
Mm.
you know, Randy, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, that was for me, that was a really big deal. And that was one of those things that where the exercise is really enforced or reinforced. Okay, bring AI in, start there, start with your questions. And many of us have like a little side thing going on, creating content or doing this or that or the other thing. And using that through this class, even though it's a side business, really helped me kind of focus and understand on how to use that on a daily basis. And now that's completely changed the way that I work on these other things too, because I'll be walking around and doing something and I'm like, oh, I have this idea, let me go work on this really quickly, and then I can kind of set it aside, as GPT does its thing and come back to it later. But it's just that exercise of get in there, do it, make it work, and it just really changes you.
You know, and as I was, so just some clarity, there were a couple of us in the room that had kind of had that AI teammate for a couple of years, right? And it was, I remember sitting at the table and one of the other people at the table was like, "You're an expert at this," and I'm like, "I am so not an expert because I just got through meeting with a team that's got 400 agentic AI instances deployed across their corporation. I am so not an expert." But it's interesting because it's almost like as you explore through this, but here's the thing. One of the things we talk about in the class is that 80% of AI projects fail, but it's not because of the technology, but it's because of the adoption and the capability gaps. And the foundations course is designed to kind of get that idea of if everybody in your company is AI native, then you're going to have less soft spots throughout your whole value stream. The change agent one we'll talk about a little bit more about later, but when you think about this, there's some blind spots, right? This value gap, are we actually adding value by doing this? You've got the POC graveyard, which as a more of a strategic advisor consultant, where I kind of parachute in, work for a little bit, and then I'm out. What I see a lot of is this proof of concept graveyard, where we dump all this money into AI and it's actually not viable. And then of course, hype versus reality. And so, in this, we talk about this idea about bolted on AI versus baked in AI, right?
Mm.
And so, we have a question here. I'll go ahead and answer it as we go here. We'll have plenty of time for the ones at the end, but I want to grab some input from you. So we have a question here. What are the other tools and agents other than ChatGPT that can transform the ways of working across different roles in SAFe? So I'll start with this and then hand it over to one of you, which is ChatGPT is a product that represents a large language model. And there are lots and lots of large language models. At the table I was sitting at, I had Claude, I had Gemini, I had Perplexity, I had GPT, I had Grok, and then I had 2 local LLMs running on my Mac because I like to run a local one. So if I want to try something and it's just, I'm geeking out on it. But anyway, point being is all those things. And I would encourage you, if you're looking at using this inside your enterprise, make sure you look at that ethical and responsible usage of AI, because as you learn in the class, there are some places where you probably don't want to use that content. With that said, one of you gentlemen want to chime in here?
Can I just throw something onto that real quick, Phil?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I was actually, and I posted this on LinkedIn this morning. There was a study done by MIT that was published, I don't know, like the end of last month. And it said that 95% of all AI projects fail. But a large reason for that was not being able to make the connection to understand what's going on and, kind of why you're doing this thing altogether. It really isn't about the tools a lot, but I do want to say that the tools are important. For me, one of the ones that I actually started to use out of this was Replit. It's a pretty neat one. There's a lot that it can do, and I'm starting to use it to build websites and to do a number of other things. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so something I would just add to that as well is, again, it's not so much about the tooling here too, but I would say that the new vocabulary is becoming critical to understand and to learn. For example, understanding what RAG is, right? Retrieval augmented, things like that, understanding these different concepts in AI, understanding vector graphs, those types of collaborations and conversations are going to happen with those art roles in SAFe and with other roles in the framework as well. And so I would say, just from a flow perspective, and a communication perspective, everybody being aligned on this new vocabulary is absolutely critical.
Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about, RAG, retrieval augmented generation, in just a bit. So when we think about the course itself, right, it talks about AI as a teammate, as Russell had mentioned earlier, right? And when you think about this, AI as a thought partner, not just a task tool. So for example, I'm speaking at the summit next week, and I'm doing a last minute update to my deck because I actually want to give the participants some prompts to take with them. The talks about Shark Tank and using kind of this Shark Tank style approach to scrutinizing the heck out of your epics. And I actually have a LLM that's been trained to be like some personalities you might see on TV to really just rip my presentation apart. And so there's some fun things like that you can do. But drafting content, decision preparation, automating repetitive tasks, and you want to look at building fluency. How can AI help? So when we think about that as a teammate and how it can help, Russell, anything else you want to add to what you said earlier?
I just say the intern analogy is really, really useful for a couple of reasons. One of which is sometimes it does something really, really dumb, and sometimes it does something really, really brilliant. A lot of that depends on the instructions that you give it. And so you just need to review and observe, and sometimes it will amaze and surprise you and come up with really, really great stuff. The other key aspect is, like an intern, it really, really wants you to be happy, and it will try and give you an answer that will make you happy. So you need to be aware of that tendency, and you need to work against it. And one thing that I've done is recently I've been through sort of an RFP process. I've got it to generate some of the material for that, but then I've got a chatbot to criticize it. I've asked it specifically to tear holes in its own material, which is quite an interesting thing to be able to do. So you can get it to critique its own work. But I think it is really important that the quality of the output is really the quality of the prompts that you write for it. So you need to really think about how you're going to instruct it and understand its strengths and weaknesses. And so I think the intern analogy is a really, really good one. And be aware it just wants you to be happy, that it's trying to complete text that will make you happy.
It's an engagement model.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's brilliant, and it's insightful, but yeah, it wants you to be happy.
Bryan, Randy, anything you'd add to this topic?
I guess for me, I would say, and I'm looking in the chat or in the Q&A, and Mike posted something about kind of treating it as a junior coworker or intern. I think the thing that had occurred to me as I was going through this in class is, there are a lot of people who will just think, oh, I can just dump my idea into GPT and it'll come up with something great. Maybe if you're lucky. But one of the things that Steve Maynor, who was our instructor in the class, was talking about was, he said, I will sometimes spend a day and a half iterating over a prompt in order to get the prompt right, because I know that this is going to have a very material impact on how this thing works. And another thing that he emphasized in class is, look, you can give some of this over to AI, but in the end, you as the human are bringing your own creativity, your own thoughts, and your own knowledge, and you're using that to enhance what you've already got. It's not going to make those connections and replace you. It'll give you ideas, but it's not there to replace you. It just, you will get the best average that the AI is trained for. So
go ahead, Russell.
I was just going to yes and what Randy said, which is that when you're interacting with a human being, there's a lot of shared experience that is unspoken, and you can rely on that shared experience. When you're interacting with an AI, you don't have that shared experience. And so it's not, it's bringing some stuff to the table, but it's bringing stuff to the table that's different from what a human might bring to the table. So being able to bring in additional documents, when you do that RAG thing, being able to write very, very specific prompts which include information that a human being might assume and then bring to that conversation, but an AI isn't, is really, really important.
I want to add
and I
one
don't mean
thing.
to imply that Americans are not in any way polite, lovely, friendly people.
He's been to a Buc-ee's, so he has seen polite people. Side note, when Russell came in town, Randy felt very passionate about a rite of passage for anybody visiting is to go to a Buc-ee's. Anyway, last thing on Mike's point about, this idea of hallucinations and stuff. One of the fallacies that happens, and that, one of those bubbles that pops up inside the AI native class, is that sometimes you may have a cat on your desk that you're petting during a webinar, and if the person who's presenting happens to see squirrels, then he might see the cat and not think about what he was going to say. I remember now.
Sorry,
I'm just giving you a hard time. Right. What I was going to say, though, is that treating AI as a teammate is essential. And hallucinations are real. But when many organizations get stuck, though, is thinking that prompt engineering alone is the solution. In reality, that real power comes when you combine good prompting with structural approaches, fine tuning, retrieval augmented generation, also known as RAG. Those methods reduce hallucinations, and they align the model more closely to your domain, and ensure consistency. So if you've invested significant amounts of money in fine tuning an LLM, the hallucinations that you hear of if you just pull up ChatGPT are significantly lessened. And so think of it this way: that blend of technical enablers, fine-tuning, RAG, integration, and human fluency, AI native people, prompting, mindset, adoption, that's the heart of becoming AI native. Bryan.
No, it's funny. Jess actually already put it in chat. I was going to bring up the fact that context is key, because you can have the most brilliant individual on the planet, and if you bring them in and they don't understand the context, they're not going to be good at their job. Right. And so they have to understand the context. And what I've found with AI models is a lot of time context goes stale faster than we think it does. And so if we're not keeping that up to date pretty regularly, we do run into challenges where maybe they are just saying something, the AI is just saying something to make us feel happy and not really challenging an assumption that we made or something to that effect. So I think they are extremely powerful as a sounding board, if you will, though, to be able to uncover your unknown unknowns, to be able to see things that maybe you can't see alone.
Okay. We did have a question that came into chat. Bryan popped over here. I'm going to hold off on this one because Pam had put a question inside chat. I'm going to hold off on that until we get a little bit farther, because we might answer it as we go. If not, we can talk about it at the end there. Thinking about this, we'll come back to Jess in just a sec for yours. Panelists, right? What's one hidden capability that you personally discovered in a tool you were already using that made you realize how much untapped value there is out there, right? I mean, we're talking about here is this idea. Imagine AI capability as an iceberg. People see the surface features, right? Advanced features in Copilot or automation in ChatGPT, AI and tools like Dotwork. Anybody feel passionate about starting us out on this one?
For me, I think it was honestly the custom GPT. It seems very basic, but I didn't put a lot of time or effort into it before, but when I came back from class, I'm like, I need custom GPTs to do this, this, and this. If you're familiar with, Star Trek: The Next Generation, sorry, I'm showing my age maybe, but you have just this concept of a general holodeck that can do just about anything, which is kind of like your large language model. But when they run into really interesting problems, you need that extra focus. So, kind of to Russell's point of, well, I was going through an RFP process and I created a custom GPT to try to rip apart the content. You're not going to get that level of thinking and focus with just kind of a standard GPT. So for me, just the custom GPTs and getting that personality in there and that additional focus was a big deal.
Awesome. How about you, Bryan?
To add on to what Randy said, once you have that custom GPT, you can start doing the retrieval augmented generation. And I have found that to be an absolute game changer. And it's because you bring in your real context, your real documents, your real process, and you bring it into the LLM's domain, basically, where now it can understand your context explicitly. So you can ask it very detailed questions that usually you have to have somebody, from HR or a manager tell you the answer to these questions. And in this case, the AI is going to be able to help. So I think that's an absolute game changer. Even if you're not going to be leveraging AI everywhere, that alone is going to be an absolute game changer, I would suggest.
Awesome. And Russell, what about you? That AI capability iceberg, what was underneath the water for you?
For me, it was really about automations and API integrations. So I took the step after the course, and I think I was a little bit intimidated beforehand, but of creating connections between the other online tools that I use, in particular, like my sort of backlog tool that I use in my personal life, and integrating that with chat, so that basically it can help me organize myself. So starting those integrations and starting getting chat working with other tools as well is really, really powerful for me. It's still baby steps, but it's kind of a yes and to what Bryan and Randy are saying, is that if you can have that custom GPT and then start to train it up, and then you can start to feed it data from other sources, then you got yourself a really, really powerful assistant. And that's really turned things around for me in the last 2-3 weeks, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like you get going and it's next thing it's this, then it's this, then it's this, and it's all connected.
Yeah, there's a
I-
step change from interesting toy to really, really useful day-to-day tool, right?
yes. So by the way, the questions, and if you get your question, we have time for all of them. I'm timing my answering to some of them. So if your question is not getting answered right away, understand that I want to get through some of the other content, and then we'll make sure that if we haven't hit it on the way, we'll get it at the end there. At the end of the day, uncovering those hidden features saves time and boosts value. And it's like, we're not getting the value out of this thing. Quite frankly, what hit me when Steve was talking about this in the class was the fact that, kind of like the Scaled Agile framework, right? I mean, the number of times I've seen people implement SAFe and then complain they're not getting anything out of it. How often that is that tracked back to human decisions? How often is that tracked back to not understanding the full capabilities? Kind of the SAFe capability iceberg, if you will, right? Like, SAFe doesn't do product management. We need a product operating model. I mean, all the stuff in POM is inside the framework. It's just, do the people who are introducing it know about it all? So on that note, Bryan, Randy, Russell, we're all SPCTs, right? And we all help leaders in different ways. Some of us are more on the consulting side, some are more on the product side, some are more in the classroom. But together, we're all in the same boat here. We have, both in the classroom, in the boardroom, and at the Agile Release Train, or in the product world, we've got people who are skeptical about AI. How do you explain AI native to a skeptical client or colleague in simple terms? Randy.
So I think a lot of it is, skepticism, for instance, really comes from things that we talked about earlier, maybe a POC graveyard or a hype cycle or something like that. A lot of people in product have seen that over and over and over again. So how do I explain it? I explain it as, sit down and you can very simply and very easily come up with a small product that you can bring to life pretty quickly using AI. So kind of break that cycle of, well, I'm worried about it, or I'm concerned about it, or I don't see how it will help, by actually just getting out there and doing it. Just having it be a part of your life, I think tends to make you an evangelist of it when you begin to understand really the power that it brings to the table.
Mr. Vahogne. By the way, my daughter used to call him Mr. Vahogne. It's Vaughn, but Mr. Vaughn.
Yeah, with this, it's an interesting thing because a lot of times when folks start talking about AI, the first thing they think of, or at least in the recent past, is, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose my job to this, right? To this AI. And in reality, that's not the case, right? It's oftentimes that the AI is going to enhance and augment the people doing the work. It's not going to replace them entirely. It's not going to supplant them. It is going to be another skill that they leverage. And so I would say that your skepticism is understandable, very understandable as to why you're being skeptical of this, because there's a lot of technologies out there that have promised a lot but not delivered. And we had that data before saying, hey, we had 80 to 95% of AI projects tend to fail because it's not implemented appropriately. And so, with that in mind, that skepticism is well deserved. But what I would say is start peeling into this. And AI native, what it does is it puts AI at the forefront of your mindset, where everything you do, you're going through day to day. You can ask yourself, how can AI help me do this better, faster, more effectively? And as you start using AI and tweaking it in small ways, you're going to start seeing some small wins, and those wins are going to add up. And eventually that'll lead you to be comfortable enough to start looking at, well, the AI can help us solve these major challenges. And so you don't have to start with everything. Just start small and build from there.
Awesome. Good advice and insights. Russell.
A couple of things. First of all, it's a tool to solve problems, and we need to treat it as such. And it's very similar to Agile and SAFe in that sort of regard, right? Is you don't do Agile and don't do SAFe for its own benefit. You do it to solve business problems. We don't implement AI, though we're cresting the hype cycle at the moment. We don't implement AI for its own sake. We do it to solve specific business problems. So the way to overcome that cynicism, and I think people recognize a hype cycle when they see it, is to solve a problem, solve a small problem using AI, and then solve a bigger problem, and that gives you permission to solve a bigger problem, and solve it in real ways and measure the benefit that it's actually solving, and then that gives you leverage to actually solve more problems using this tool. So it's another tool in the toolkit. I used to draw the analogy of Excel. For those of you who are old enough, when Excel came on board, there was a lot of talk about when we won't need accountants anymore. And of course, we still need accountants. It's just that those accountants are no longer sitting in front of, big physical pieces of paper crunching numbers. They're able to do much more value add sort of work. And AI is going to be very, very much like that. So
Yeah, and when we think about AI native, especially the technology space, right? It's not about replacing people; it's about augmenting these professionals. And so, just some my own thoughts there. Focus on fluency, not hype. We've talked about that, right? But being comfortable and confident using AI responsibly, right? This is one of those things where you're going to encounter people on your journey that I've already seen, strong opinions. Which is the best LLM, right? Which one hallucinates more? All those types of things. And just like iOS versus Android, you're going to have the philosophies on which one's better. And one thing about this AI native experience is that never in the class did Dr. Maynard say this one's better than that one, right?
Yeah.
And I would encourage you, when you look at trying to bring people along, don't get caught up in that this versus that. And so, lots of good stuff there. On that advice note, right? When we think about the advice side of things, what's some advice you might give to professionals who want to start becoming AI native themselves?
For me, again, just kind of the same things we've talked about. Start small. I would say start with something that you're passionate about, because that's going to be more likely to drive what you do. I had a need to screen scrape an Android phone, something on an Android phone on an app. I have no idea how to do this, never done it before. I did come from a technical background, to be fair, but no idea. But I was passionate about needing to do it. And within, I would say, half an hour, I was off screen scraping this Android phone, mostly because it was interesting to me. The other thing that I like to do, and I have a little piece of electronics called a Flipper Zero, for those who are familiar with it. But I wanted to learn how to use it. And so I had AI kind of curate a list of little projects for me to go tweak at. And I would go tackle them once a week just to go learn how to do various things.
Ethical AI.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite.
So the Flipper is a device that can be used for not ethical stuff as well, right? So, Russell, Ryan, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think the AI native course is quite nice in that you come out of it with a little workflow of your own that you have used AI to augment. And so if you want to become AI native, I would say start with that. Think of something that's a little bit painful for you, and then start to unpack that and look at how AI might be able to make that less painful for you as you go. But it was something that Dr. Steve said in the course, which was really helpful to me, which is ask AI, right? You can actually start to ask AI how you might start to use AI. For me, it was about getting over this idea that asking AI was cheating in some sort of way. And it's actually just, this is going to be the way that we do things from now on.
Yes.
Right? So ask AI how it can help you in your day-to-day. Explain what your day-to-day life is and ask AI how it can actually help you. And it will come up with some good ideas. It will come up maybe with some dumb ideas, but you can just ignore those. But the good ideas you can harvest, and then you can use that to move forward.
Bryan, a couple thoughts on yours, and I'll share a couple of my own on this one.
Yeah, some of the things that have helped me, and it's more generic for almost any new context you're getting into, any new technology you're getting into, but find communities that are engaged with it. Find communities that are interested in it. Find people that are talking about it, because there are so many blogs, there are so many meetups, there are so many webinars like this going on, that if you're interested, just start going to some of these and asking questions like y'all are doing today. It's a really good way to get started. And one of the things that I started doing was, as I start looking through, different platforms, I started seeing different prompts. And so now I actually capture the prompts and I play with them on my own. And so I got one prompt here that I can just copy and paste into an LLM, and it's going to give me a very specific flow, a very specific way it answers. And I'm actually starting to get into JSON because of that as well. But I have quite a few different prompts that are just listed here already, and I'm able to leverage those. And so just play with prompts you find. People are giving out prompts. They're telling you some tips. Copy that, paste it into your LLM, and see where you go from there.
I'm going to use a little bit of our time here, right? So this was focused really on the experience in the class, but we're getting some questions that are more, from us as, AI practitioners. I will tell you right now that Scaled Agile made a decision. I personally love it, which was decoupling the expert trainer from the trusted advisor. You can deliver a good leading safe class without ever having lived through implementing agile release trains and large scale transformation and still do a good class, right? But here, the course that the four of us have gone through and some additional training we're getting is going to get us prepared to be an AI trainer. But there's a separate path to become an AI trusted advisor. And so some of the questions you're asking here, we're going to do our best on. We all have different backgrounds and experiences, and just like you might ask different AI, different LLMs, different questions. I want to just kind of caveat here that we're not. I personally am not marketing myself as an AI expert. I will say that I'm really good at connecting people to stuff and to other experts and things like that. But just a little bit on the advice here, right? Start with something, right? I did an ASPC class, and I encouraged them all to say, what was one thing that you could have checked against AI in here, right? And sometimes that doesn't sound right, but even if it's something different, it gets you thinking more. Also, you can using prompts, you can actually create prompts that will ensure that if you're pulling some information off the internet, that it cites all of your sources, right? And then have it double check those. All that to say that it's not infallible, but there are things that can lessen some of those things that occur. Bryan's already given you one tip: a prompt library, right? Scaled Agile has a new something coming that's going to help us work as community. I don't want to steal any thunder. And there's a space on there for AI native, people to get together and share stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then finally asking yourself, where could AI unlock value here? So with that said, I want to tackle a couple of these questions in the chat that we have. And so, Jess has this question here, right? How can organizations determine which AI tools are secure to use and for whom? Now, most AI, like Replit, are tools that devs and engineers can use, but what about the rest of the roles in the organization? I will tell you that Replit is, I would actually, and I don't want to call out Replit because there are other competitors out there, but tools like Replit, these no-code AI tools, can be used by anybody, right? In fact, a tool like Replit, could have been Replit, was used to create the course experience that we had. So we didn't use Safe Collaborator, Miro, or Mural, or Bluescape, or Lucid Sparks. We actually used an application that was built for the AI Foundations class. And so you can use Replit. Randy has a hobby. He loves vending machines.
Dude.
And so he's using Replit to help him with vending machines. So lots of cool stuff there. But going back to the security side, right? The same rigor you use for any enterprise technology, vendor due diligence, data handling policies, compliance checks, integration with existing security frameworks. The key is to align AI tools to the enterprise governance, not to create a separate AI governance. Who owns the data? Where is it stored? How is it encrypted? Where it meets the standards like SOC 2, ISO, et cetera, in the government, FedRAMP. You want to, all those things don't go away, right? And then you also want security for different roles. I work with a lot of C-suite or C+1 leaders, and we talk about AI now when we look at strategic portfolio management quite a bit, or trying to kind of turn around their safe implementation. And one of the things I'll ask is, are you using AI? And they're like, no, we don't have an approved LLM yet. I said, are your people using AI? They're no, we don't have approved AI. We don't have an approved LLM yet. I'm like, okay, so do your people have phones? Do they have personal computers? Do they work from home? Is it possible they're using LLMs? And it's a conversation out there that you can put your head in the sand, but Moore's law is not applying to AI. I mean, literally, I have had a couple clients that I'm worried about them because the way they implemented AI with their licensing model for their products and services, 20% increase in the cost of tokens. Good luck. I mean, and so there's a lot of things: security, compliance, pricing. Look at it from a profit streams perspective. Hey, Gerd and Luke. But all that to say, there's all these different factors, and you want to take into consideration. Is there anything that you would add to that? Randy, Bryan, Russell, when it comes to this adoption frameworks, like looking at this AI native place and emphasizing governance and things like that.
One of the things that came out of the change agent aspect of the course was do not overlook the operational and implementation aspects of AI. It's an exciting tool, but as with all other products, and you touched on this, Phil, you need to really rethink about how you're going to actually operationalize this and what is this going to look like and what is your total cost of ownership. And you mentioned tokens, Phil, right? So, you get this exciting proof of concept and then you go to operationalize it and you realize it's just going to be prohibitively expensive to roll it out throughout the whole organization. That's just one scenario. So you really need to be thinking about these things up front as you're developing your solutions. And that's just common sense, but we do tend to get a bit excited about new cool stuff and overlook these fundamentals, but they still apply. Randy, please.
You're exactly right. I have a lot of friends, and I think there's a webinar from a friend of mine who's, I think that webinar is going to be next week. And she's talking about the necessity for having a good data strategy, and that's really a part of what we teach in class too. They really put a lot of thought into the change agent class and, all of the different dimensions of how to think through the AI problem, because people will come in and they're like, oh yeah, let's go do AI. And it's this big, kind of ball of mud, but
Yeah.
the class really kind of helps you poke at that and figure out what's going on there. I really, really appreciated that piece of it. The other thing too, and I guess I would just say, you know, in a lot of ways, putting AI in, if you're just using large language models, just kind of even the off the shelf stuff, just think of it similarly to, if I were going to go do a software as a service implementation, what would I do with that? Salesforce, PII, HIPAA, whatever. You've got the same kinds of things, like Phil said.
Ryan, anything you want to add?
No, I was actually looking at what you're putting there around MPC, and it's an interesting conversation because there's a lot of different MPC servers out there today. But I think there is some standardization that's starting to occur with those too, where everyone is having similar formats and all that goodness. So what I would say with that is, if you're going to choose an MPC to use right now, just be aware it's going to be updated quite frequently over the next couple of years, and just be prepared for that operational expense, whichever one you choose.
Like I said, this is where we're kind of geeking out here, right? So I'm going to just give a lightning round for a couple of answers here, and then we'll get back in a couple more and wrap it up. The powerful question there from Hisham, right? Are there cases where you would advise against the use of AI? Absolutely. We could actually do a whole nother webinar, I believe. So Dr. Manor and I are going to be doing a webinar. We'll get into more of the trusted advisor type content and some of the, more of a what is AI, how does it lead into change and things like that. And I think Matt, I don't have the date off the top of my head, but I think it's next month. All that to say that the cost, number one, the cost outweighs the value, right? Right. 2, the data isn't ready, right? 3, the risk is too high. Or 4, it distracts from the goal, right? And so being AI native means knowing when to use AI as much as knowing when to apply it or not to.
I would also add to that, Phil, if there's going to be a lack of accountability because you're implementing an AI, that also might be another thing to be mindful of.
Yeah, and there's a question. If you can try and if you put the questions into the Q&A, I'll make sure I grab them. There was a question about, hey, do we have to take these classes together? The answer is yes. This guy's very happy because I watched what happened when people with no LPM experience started teaching LPM, and then I saw clients that had taken that advice. So I love the fact that you need to take it and you need to go through take the foundations. And I will tell you that even for somebody that's been doing this for a while, I learned some things. And some of the stuff I learned was actually how to teach it better, how to talk to clients better, because I saw SPCTs with their light bulbs going off. These are bright people that are change agents. Let me bring it back into the classes here, right? So one practice. If you could give participants one practice to try tomorrow that will help them on their journey to being AI native, what would it be? For me, we already heard this one, right? Ask how AI can help at the start of any new task. But for me, I like to say experiment with AI as a peer reviewer or a brainstorming partner. Those are the things I miss about being part of a big in-person team. And so I use AI, and I actually have different GPTs that have different personas so that I can, well, there may even be a couple of them that I work with where I've modeled an AI after them because I miss them. So with that said, what about you, Randy, Bryan, Russell? What's your one?
For me, it was start creating a custom GPT, because I think if you can shift your thinking from it's one thing and one thing I'm interacting with to I can sculpt a specific assistant to help me with my world, that's really, really going to help you. And I think it's going to really, really help you interact with the tool a lot more, get a lot more use out of it. But also, it's going to build your skills in writing great prompts and interacting and understanding what the tool can do for you. So I think a custom GPT is a really good way to start.
Awesome. Bryan?
And I think y'all hit the nail on the head for the most part. I mean, the main thing is just to get your hands dirty, start applying it, because as you start to use the tools, as you start to kind of experience what some of the limitations of AI are and how to maneuver around those limitations, like saying, hey, I need to add more context here. Hey, I need to give the AI a role, things like that. You'll start to see, wow, okay, well, what if I did this in this business flow that we have? What if I did this in this sales flow that we have? It becomes a complete game changer. And so I would say just start off with basically what Russell and Phil said. Just start using it, start customizing it where you need to, and just keep on adding something small every day, I would say, or every week. Add a small thing that you've never done before, you never tried with the AI before. Just add one small thing every week.
Absolutely. That's great. Any other thoughts on this?
In the end, the text you type as you go through and do your chat is going to turn into a prompt somehow on the back end or something like it. So the thing that I have come to like to do is have it not create the content for me, but to have it create a prompt for me. And I can look over the prompt and begin to understand how it's thinking about the problem. And then I fine tune the prompt. And then when I'm ready, finally, I say, okay, go execute the prompt. So I would say, turn your chat into a prompt, have it create a prompt for whatever you want to do, and then iterate over the prompt. It's a really neat process, and it really helps you get solid on what you want.
Awesome. So a couple of questions, a couple more things here. I want to just make sure we've got a couple more questions in here. I will tell you that absolutely, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we don't get any question before we run out of our time box, we can post the questions and our answers on the webinar recording page. That way you've got them handy there, as opposed to having to go try and find an email. With that said, I think we're good on the majority of the stuff here. I want to tackle a couple of these questions, right? So how do you determine if an AI problem versus something else, right? People tend to rush to say, hey, having AI just do this, right? Slapping AI everywhere isn't the answer. So we didn't talk a lot about the change agent class, right? Because a lot of people, because it is a sequential learning path, you must take AI foundations before you can take the AI change agent. But I will tell you that a little bit about the flow. So AI foundations is basically a day of let's all get aligned on what AI is and what it means to be AI native, and some of the generic stuff. You'll learn terms that, like RAG and what fine tuning means and where you might use one versus the other. Not going to talk about that inside foundations. You get into AI change agent, and that's basically saying, look, we need to implement AI. And so we need a strategy. We need a framework, not a framework like SAFe, but we need a blueprint. We need a plan to be able to do this. And it's not just the technology and understanding, the cost, the pros and cons and the costs of fine tuning versus RAG. It's also, how do you get people to actually change? And one of the things, I have a soft spot in my heart for Dr. Steve Maynard because he was my mentor through the SPCT program. He also created this amazing leadership program for Scaled Agile that many of us had a chance to do. It was like life-changing kind of leadership stuff. That you can see some of that in the Change Leader course, because he understands how to get leaders on board and get them engaged and get some of these decisions that we're avoiding made. And so Change Agent talks about that as well. It's not a technology class where you learn all about AI. It's about an enablement class to actually effectively get AI into your enterprise or into your agency and being used. So going back to this question, identify a problem with AI, start with the outcome, right? What decision, action, or value are we trying to actually achieve? 2, check the foundation. 3, look for fit. And these are some concepts that come from the AI change agent course. Looking at this next one here, we've got can you describe a personal AI maturity scale? I actually don't have one. I believe that there's some that are out there. I'm going to put a pin in that one because it's a longer question, a longer answer. And unless Brian, Russell, or Randy has a link they can send you, I'll move on to this last one.
Go ahead and send it in the chat. We'll go on.
Okay.
Is that the maturity scale question?
Yeah.
I was just going to say N is you are an AI bot.
Yeah. So if a person has virtually no experience with AI, does the foundation course start out with the very basics? Absolutely. And it is, what I like to think about it is it's an equalizer. And so, Joe Vallone and myself, and there are a couple others that have been doing this for a while, not that we're better at it, but we've been exposed to clients that are tackling these problems, which is a forcing function, for us to learn faster. And we've been doing that for a couple of years now. We were in there with people who were like, whoa, this is not what I thought it was. So day one is that. Day two is, by the time you get into day two, you're applying it to your context. You walk away from that class with something that you can implement if you haven't already. Now, that's where, being mindful, if we teach it, when we teach that class privately, being mindful of the policies and procedures of the company that we're working with. But from an individual perspective, you will walk away enabled. It is, those of you that have seen me talk over the years, this is one I'm excited about. It really is a great class. I will say this, personal opinion, the instructor matters. This is something where, do you have stories? Do you have insights? Or do you have slides? And this one is not one, in my personal opinion, that you'll want to rely on the slides. So I would encourage you, whether it's me or Russell, hey, tell me why I should take this from you versus somebody else. Brian.
But we still have that question from Pam as well. Did we want to get to that? So the question was, let's see, can you show examples on how to ask contextual questions that allow the AI client to read between the lines intellectually? Is that possible with AI tools?
Can we maybe come back to that? Brian, would you be good if maybe we as a group, got an answer on that one for the webinars? I think that one's got more than 30 seconds or a minute of answers. I'm looking at our time. So Pam, Brian and I and Russell and Randy will get you an answer. With that said, Matt, anything else you need to share? Things like that? I know we are going to record this. This was recorded. It'll be posted.
We'll have everything sent out. Summit is next week, and so the recording may take a little bit of time for us to get posted because we're all going to be traveling in the next couple of days and doing stuff at Summit. But we will actually absolutely get a recording posted, and we have Pam's information. We'll send her the answer, and I can actually send it out to everyone so that everyone sees the info from that chat.
Yeah. And like I said, the last question I saw in there was the one around why in person. It's a better experience. It
is.
We learned from our table, right? And you were the collaborations, and you're thinking, well, why would I collaborate if we all have our own GPTs or our own, And the answer was, hey, this person using Claude, this person over here is using an aggregate tool that actually pulls in from multiple LLMs. And it was kind of like we all have our own phones, but we're sitting around talking about a topic. So I just want to say, Mr. Vaughn, Mr. Smith, Mr. Andrews, and Mr. Lassiter, thank you all. We hope to do more of these panel style interviews. If you've got feedback on the format, would love to hear it. Otherwise, we'll see you again next time.